need to talk about. We got to some disputes on who the Gators should start. I think the biggest one people are going to look at is Montrell Johnson and Jaden Ball. Now, Montrell Johnson has 373 rushing yards on the season, 5.3 yards per carry, and 4 touchdowns. Montrell's biggest game, I think, was Tennessee. Montrell's another one of those injuries against Tennessee, like Graham Mertz, where if Montrell doesn't get hurt, maybe Florida beats Tennessee. Montrell, obviously, in his 4th season as in college, 3rd season starting for UF. I don't think there's any chance that Montrell doesn't start unless he doesn't play. But I feel pretty confident that Montrell will play against Georgia. Big rivalry game, a lot on the line, especially looking at the other side with Georgia's backfield. We all know who the starting running back for the Georgia Bulldogs is right now. So I think Montrell is definitely going to want to suit up. But you do have Jaden Ball with 259 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns, 4.9 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns against Kentucky. Although, as impressive as it looked then, not going to take away from it, it does look a little bit less impressive now, as we just saw Jarquez Hunter, who's one of the best running backs in the SEC at Auburn, go for 200 yards on Kentucky. So this Kentucky defense might be falling off a bit, especially coming off that loss to Vanderbilt. So I don't think there is as much of a question of who should start as people want to think there is. Because obviously you see the more explosive freshman running back come in and put up 5 touchdowns. Then there's Montrell Johnson, who gets more carries against better defensive fronts, which I think does paint a worse picture on people's head than it should. Because he's going to be facing this Georgia front that's going to have multiple 5-stars, some of the best defensive linemen in the country, including Michael Williams. And you look at the past, you look at that Texas A&M game, you see that Texas A&M defensive line is elite. And Montrell didn't have the best game there, but I think you can also point to that Texas A&M D-line. And then, like, you can say, oh, Will Ball or Jacoby Jackson, even the JUCO transfer, had a bit more success. That's also later in the game, like maybe against their backups. He's not doing it against their starters. Montrell's also that guy who you put in there, and he's going to wear down the defense and the defensive front, which will allow Ball to come in and hopefully break off a big play. Jackson come in and do the exact same thing. Maybe even open up the running back, the halfback wheel. You know, back in 2020 when the Gators beat Georgia, halfback wheels dominated them. Could we see us try to do that again? I think the Ball is a bit better of a receiving back than Montrell is. So we'll see that to come. The next starting dispute I want to talk about, this is more of a fun one and a lot more of a actual debate on who should start. And it's really neither of, oh, well, I think this guy's better. It's not a younger guy coming up against an older guy. It's 2 players from the same class at Star. You have Aaron Gates and Sharif Denson. Coming off the Tennessee game, you saw Sharif Denson get the interception on Nico. Denson, a really physical star, has good tackling abilities, good in coverage. And you saw everyone saying, man, this kid is the future. He's going to light it up here in Gainesville. Then you saw against Kentucky, Aaron Gates, more athletic, still really good tackler, good in coverage as well. You saw him have an insane game against Kentucky. So then you have people saying, oh, man, this guy's the future. So which is it? Well, you have Sharif Denson, who is the true sophomore. He did not redshirt last season. We saw him play a lot against FSU in particular last season, had an astounding game. Then you have Sharif Dents or Aaron Gates, who took his red shirt last season, didn't play, got a year to get his body closer to the SEC standard, and now we see him playing well. I think we start Denson, but it's very close, and both of these guys are going to get a ton of playing time, and maybe we see them both on the field. I think that's something that could be very interesting to look out for. Another probably less likely starting dispute, with Jason Marshall possibly out for the season. We don't know. I've heard that he's going to be out. I've also heard that he's going to try to play and that there's not severe damage. But we really won't know until we see these injury reports on Wednesday. But if he doesn't play, the two corners who are likely to start are going to be Devin Moore, who's been cornerback 2 next to Marshall the entire season, unless he's been hurt, and Dijon Johnson. With the injury of Jakeem Jackson, even without Jakeem, Dijon's really took the spot above Jakeem. I think Dijon's played really well this season. So I think those two are likely not really going to have any worry about who's behind them. But the name that everybody is looking out for, Cormani McClain, the former 5-star top 15 prospect, went to Colorado, transfers to Florida. Everybody saw what he did against Kentucky. Now, that was also on the backup, the third-string QB for Kentucky. Really weird quarterback dynamic there because they bring in Gavin Wimsatt with Vandergriff obviously starting. They bring in Wimsatt a good bit and more to run the ball. But they also had another QB, I can't remember his name, who when they sat Vandergriff, it was him and not Wimsatt come in. He's the one who threw the pick six, through the pass deflection from that Cormani got in the end zone. So you do have a lot of people claiming that Cormani should play because of his 5-star status and what he did against Kentucky. Now, what do I think of this? It's one game. One game, third, fourth quarter he played against some not so great receivers at Kentucky, not so great quarterback at Kentucky. I say you do see him play against Georgia. I think his athleticism and his wingspan especially is too much to keep off the field. You need to put him on the field. If Carson Beck especially starts dialing it up against us, you're going to need somebody who, if Carson Beck makes that great throw, that can still break up those coverages. That's the thing with Jakeem, why he was ranked so highly out of high school. It's his upside. Same thing with Cormani.